Hello everybody, and welcome again to my channel. This time I wanted to address the subject of how do you wake up one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And this is something that's been on my mind for a very long time, and no doubt it's been on the mind of a lot of us out there. But before I do that, I want to mention a channel that I've just come across, New Light 2075. I've just gone through his story of what he went through waking up, and he tells a story of dealing with more than one body of elders that had some interesting practices where they didn't do things the way they should have. And I understand his story because I served as an elder for almost 10 years. And during that time, on one of the bodies of elders I served on, I spent a considerable amount of effort trying to keep at least one of the brothers from being abusive to the sheep. And it's quite common for bodies of elders to be crazy like the one that he describes. So I think that you should check out his channel if you haven't and listen to his stories, especially the one about waking up, because there are lots of bodies of elders like that out there that run their own little kingdoms and are very abusive to people. So that being the case, once again I wanted to address the issue of how do you wake up Jehovah's Witnesses? The answer is simple. You don't. I don't believe there is any way that any one of us can wake up one of Jehovah's Witnesses. The reason for this is because they are in fact under mind control. I know this because I was under that mind control for somewhere around 30 years. And even when I was serving as an elder for almost 10 years, I was still under that mind control. I remember I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I wasn't quite born in, but pretty close to it. And I remember times when I was probably around 10 years old or younger. I would see things that just didn't make sense, and I would, at that age, shut my mind off because, well, this is Jehovah's organization that is telling me this. If I don't understand it, I'll just have to wait on Jehovah. And of course, the way the mind control works is there's a massive amount of fear built up that makes you shut your mind off like that. So you're afraid that if you are out of Jehovah's organization that you're going to die in Armageddon. You're afraid that if you leave Jehovah's organization that the demons are going to get you. When you're in the organization, there's always a lot of guilt that you're not doing enough. These are very powerful forces. I highly recommend, if you have not done so yet, looking into Stephen Hassan's work on combating cult mind control. He describes a model called the bite model, which describes the way the high control groups work and describes the effects that they have on people. Now, despite the fact that I literally had doubts from childhood, nonetheless, I still progressed and I became an elder and served as such for a while. And even when I was an elder, I still had those doubts. But I always pushed them out of my head, and I always convinced myself that, well, this is Jehovah's organization, and things will get refined when they need to. And there were lots of disturbing things that I came across. Like I mentioned, sometimes interactions with elders were interesting. In fact, one of the things that I came across is when I tried to prevent one of the elders from being abusive, and I tried to get the body of elders to take care of it, despite the fact that this brother was neither following scriptural guidelines nor following society guidelines, I was the one that got in trouble for trying to address it. That being said, though, that didn't wake me up. In my particular case, what woke me up was after decades of doing things the way I was supposed to, I found myself living a completely and totally miserable life because I'd followed all the rules. And in the situation I was in, there was no way out of that if I continued to follow the rules. So I was kind of forced into waking up. And that kind of colors my viewpoint of whether or not you can wake up Jehovah's Witnesses, because myself, even having had doubts, unless something massively bad, I guess, had happened to me, I wouldn't have been able to wake up. So for us to assume that we can go and wake people up might be something that we actually don't have the ability to do. Nonetheless, there are still people that are in the watchtower that we care about. And there are things that I believe that we can do that will contribute to their waking up. And I believe this because my honest belief is that, like myself, I'm guessing that most, if not all, Jehovah's Witnesses have doubts on some level. There's something that they're waiting on Jehovah about. They're waiting for him to clarify something, or what have you, because there's some teaching that they can probably tell is just incredibly stupid. But they do what I did. They wait on Jehovah because it's Jehovah's organization. It's God's channel of communication. So if we keep that in mind as we approach our conversations with Jehovah's Witnesses, it might help us to temper our expectations. No matter how much logic we use, no matter how many facts we throw at them, they're immune to these things. They're trained to shut their minds off. And when someone shuts their mind off, it doesn't matter what you tell them. They're not hearing it, they're not thinking about it, they're not processing it. So the information becomes useless. It goes in one ear and out the other. So what happens is you have to find subtle ways of planting ideas in their mind that demonstrate that there's something else that they should be doubting. Now, in my last video, I talked about expiration date of literature, and that's one that's fairly obvious. But enough little points like that, especially when you compare the literature to the Bible. Say, well, in the New Testament, after the conversion to Christianity, which part of the New Testament ever became out of date? When did the light from the New Testament become brighter? It hasn't. And since the New Testament came out, what should have changed with regards to Christianity? And the answer should be nothing. So the new light, if you actually look at it, things aren't getting brighter, they're changing. And you can make that point by saying, well, if things are getting brighter, why is it that when you look at older literature, you don't see earlier versions of the same teaching? And you can use the generation as an example of that. The version of the generation that was taught when I was growing up was that the generation that saw in 1914 wouldn't die before Armageddon. The version of the generation that is taught now is not a refinement of that. It's something completely and totally different. And there were two iterations before that refinement, both of which were also something completely and totally different. And if you look at them honestly, that's the truth. So I kind of think that the trick to helping somebody to nurture their doubts, if you will, is to subtly provide them with more things that they should be doubting. There are a number of things out there that we can work with, especially with like the Australian Royal Commission and those issues. Another thing too is the witnesses are not informed about the amount of money that the Watchtower is making by selling their properties in Brooklyn. There are reputable news sources from New York that report on those things. If you can find those things and say, oh, did you realize that the society stands to earn $1 billion more by selling these two properties? Oh, and by the way, in the last couple of years, they earned over $1 billion by selling all these properties. So I'm just curious, why is it you think that they need so much money? Just these little things where you're kind of raising a question. You're not directly attacking the organization, but you're using facts that are easy to back up, and they're putting things into people's minds that could be questions. So the whole point is that there is no silver bullet for waking people up, and different things will work for different people. You never know what experiences somebody's had. There's a lot of crazy things that happen to Jehovah's Witnesses. Many of us have probably heard stories about people having been treated abusively by elders. So all those things factor into somebody waking up. But we want to make sure that as we're doing this, especially for people that we know, that we're not becoming confrontational with them. So just kind of, I'm guessing the best way is to present the information in a way that might make them think, but not to push it. And you have to realize that oftentimes, I think when you bring things like this up, that you have to drop it pretty quick. Something that was really interesting to me is the unwitness actually went to a Kingdom Hall, and he was able to have long conversations about some of these things with people in the Kingdom Hall because their guard was down since they assumed that he was an interested person. So there are times and places where you're going to be more free to discuss things. But if you're in a situation with your relatives or individuals that know you, their guard is probably going to go up quicker than that. So I don't know how much this helps, but I think that if we're able to raise enough question, if you will, we might be able to assist the person to develop doubt to such a level where they can no longer tolerate it without looking into it. But I don't think that's a guarantee. I think it's something that we all strive for, and it's something that has to be approached carefully, because even those who are in a state where they have been disfellowshipped are not necessarily open to realizing what the organization really is. Sometimes they might surprise you and be some of the most indoctrinated individuals out there. So anyways, this is something I was thinking about. There's no right way, there's no wrong way, there's no one sure way. But it's something that the more of us that try in some way, shape, or form, the more of us that put our stories out there, the more of us that put information out there such that it can't be ignored, I think that we'll reach individuals who have already started to question on their own and just haven't allowed themselves the freedom to answer those questions. So that's my video for this time. Thanks for watching.